All right, so we've done factoring. You did the square root method. Okay, now we do completing the square, and then next up is the quadratic formula. All right, so if you struggled with this first one, here is how you complete the square. Okay, completing the square is the easiest when the leading coefficient, so if you look up here, guys, right in front of the x squared is the leading coefficient. This leading coefficient is 1, which are the type of problems that you did in Mr. Carlin's last year. They all had leading coefficients of 1. So now we're going to be doing ones, well, what happens when the leading coefficient, the first example is like an example from you folks that took Algebra 2 last year. All right, so it says move the constant to the other side. All righty. So I get x squared plus 6x equals 10. And I know I can't factor this because the numbers that make 10, when you multiply them, none of them add up to 6. All right. Divide by the leading coefficient if necessary. In this case, the leading coefficient is 1, so you don't have to do any dividing. So we can skip that one. Okay, half, divide by 2 and square it. Okay, so I'm going to take the b value, which is 6. I'm going to divide it by 2. That's 3, and I'm going to square it. That's 9. Okay, then you're going to keep things balanced, whatever you add to one side, you got to add to the other. Okay, now what you've done over here is you've created a special kind of trinomial that'll automatically factor into the two binomials are going to be the same. What two numbers multiply together to be 9 and add together to be 6, 3 and 3. So I can just write that as x squared, x plus 3 quantity squared. That's why it's called completing the square, because this trinomial is called a perfect square trinomial. All right, so we did that, okay. We did that. Now let's take the square root. So square root. When you write the square root sign, there's 2 of them. Okay, and now we're going to solve for x. So I have 2 answers. One is -3 plus 19, root 19. And then the other one is -3 minus root 19. And if we graphed them, they would go through those 2 points. If we were to graph this thing, it would go through -3 plus square root 19. This would be one decimal solution. And then the other decimal solution would be second square root 19. So this graph goes through like 1 and -7, roughly. Okay, that's what that's telling us. All right. Now the second one is where now the leading coefficient is 2. So there's an extra step. All right, so move the constant to the other side, already done. Now what you're going to have to do is divide by the leading coefficient. So I have to get the leading coefficient to 1, so I divide everything by 2. and then divide by 2 and square it. So that's going to be 16 and 16. Negative 8 divided by 2 squared. Okay. So this guy's automatically going to be x minus 4 times x minus 4. Square root of 12. 2 square root x minus 4 equals or minus 2 root 3. And my answers are positive 4 plus 2 root 3, and positive 4 minus 2. And that's completing the square. Okay, now the other examples are just things that you come across when you're doing this, other types of problems. All right, so the next one is, you see, completing the square is nice when everything's even. 6 is even, so when I divide by 2, I get a whole number. Well, quadratics aren't always so agreeable. All right, so sometimes you end up with a number that that's not even, and you're gonna have to complete the square. All right, so we go through our steps. So x squared minus 5, subtract 3, subtract 3. All right, now I don't have to divide by anything because the coefficient here is 1. So I can skip the step dividing by a leading coefficient. Okay, now I got to take half of b. B is negative 5, divide by 2, and square it. So that's 25 over 4. That's what gets added to both sides now. So plus 25 over 4 plus 25 over 4. All right, now factoring this isn't hard because you're just using the square root. So I don't waste time going, what's going to multiply together to be 25 over 4 and add together to be negative 5. I don't have to do that here. X minus, so if you look at the other numbers here, this was 9, that's the square root of 9. This was 16, that's the square root of 16. Okay, so that's 25 over 4, so the square root of that is 2 over, or 5 over 2. It's whatever you got when you cut this in half. That's how you know it goes there. This right here goes right there. 6 divided by 2, right there. 8 divided by, negative 8 divided by 2, right there. Okay, and now over here, okay, I got to get a common denominator. 4. So negative 3 times 4, negative 12, plus 5 over 4. 5 halves equals, and what is this, 13 over 4, but I'm doing the square root of it. So that's going to be 13 over 2. Plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. Now add your 5 halves. So that's the only thing. When you have odd numbers, it just gets a little involved. So 5 plus or minus root 13 over 2. And there's your solution. Okay. All right. Looks like we're almost out of time. So we'll stop here, and tomorrow we'll do these, and then we'll show you an application. Anybody in here taking economics? Have you guys studied supply and demand curves? Oh, sweet. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about.